Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. There was this brief moment just for a second there where I took a deep breath in and hadn't said anything yet and said, what if I just turned it all off and didn't do the show and just went back to bed? It is Friday, June 26th, 2020, and that feels like a great thing to do and a great idea. We are sort of stuck in our situation. There's a raging global pandemic. The president is incompetent, possibly insane on top of that. The racial situation continues, essentially unaddressed and unabated here in the United States and around the world, and that's why there were so many demonstrations around the world over the otherwise unremarkable one of thousands of deaths of black citizens at the hands of the police, but their experience with that around the world, they all understand that that's the case. Even if not in their country, they are all seeing it happen in America and are appalled at it. And any number of incredible problems, including one that we haven't spent a great deal of time on because maybe it too is a little bit too depressing, but we certainly could turn our attention there. The Trump administration's, that's the word they use for it, administration's efforts to pursue its case against the Affordable Care Act in the middle of all of this nonsense and the pandemic, etc., to tear everyone's health care away from them. However, problems continue elsewhere, and everybody has their issues, and there are many things that people will focus on, and people can walk and chew gum at the same time. But it's weird that I turn on the Twitter machine to figure out what's going on, and that's not always the best indication of everything that's going on. And there's always at least one thing that I have no idea about, and this one, I don't know, somehow this one just strikes me in the face here. Jenna, is it Marbles? It's spelled like marbles. Is it not pronounced like marbles? I don't know who this is. Jenna Marbles addresses past problematic videos and announces she will, quote, move on from her YouTube channel. I don't know even what that is. I don't know who that person is. I'm amazed that people care about what happens on someone's YouTube channel, but my kids have made me aware of the fact that, there's an entire generation, maybe two, that knows everything about everybody somehow who's creating content on YouTube. I don't know how that's possible since anyone can do it. I don't know how you know or how you even sort out the famous ones from the non-famous ones. But anyway, I've learned that I'm hopelessly out of touch on that. And does anybody know what that is? I see in politics, the trending name, believe it or not, is Peggy Noonan. I don't know what happened there. I mean, maybe she died. I don't know. I mean, you're allowed to dream. But anyway, I don't really care what happens to Peggy Noonan. That's someone who I don't care whether they live or die, generally speaking. But also I see Carville trending. He's probably not dead. I did happen to see him say something about somebody. I think he had some praise for the, Project Lincoln group, and I guess people are upset with him for praising them because everyone wants to remind you that they're full of Republicans. They're never Trumpers, but they are Republicans, and that's true. And, what can I tell you? I think we take it with an appropriate grain of salt here. Thanks for the visual assault on Donald Trump. I won't vote for you, but thanks for beating up on Donald Trump. That's, what's wrong with that as a response? That I'm not really sure why it upsets everybody. And then, yes, up on top, we have the Trump administration urges Supreme Court to invalidate Affordable Care Act. I guess that's the algorithm at work here, trying to figure out what I'm interested in. What I can't understand is how I get Jenna Marbles and her story. Also, I guess they decided they would throw in an entertainment piece. Although I thought that maybe what Jenna Marbles was. But Eurovision movie as a hashtag is apparently trending as well. And that holds no interest for me whatsoever. But we can move on to a number of other things. So one of the serious ones, like I said, the fact that they are seeking to shred the Affordable Care Act. I have right in front of me, I note that Neil Katyal is tweeting about this. Supreme Court lawyer, as he describes himself, a law professor, former U.S. acting Solicitor General. I think at one point he might even have been was he among the apologists for Bill Barr when he was first nominated, or was it that he was okay with one of the horrific Trump Supreme Court justices being nominated? I assume Neil Gorsuch. And I assume that he probably thinks that paid off in in the stopped clock ruling from the Supreme Court, authored by Gorsuch recently, that surprised everybody, but I don't know. Anyway, he can still have some opinions that are useful and helpful, and I think this is probably one of them. He just puts it this way: make no mistake about it, the Trump administration just asked the Supreme Court to gut all of the Affordable Care Act and its insurance and protections for those with pre-existing conditions. They absolutely didn't have to file such an absurd brief. They want to take it away from you, and I think that's an important way of putting it. Let me park this in a pocket so I can share it with you later. Every time you hear Donald Trump talk about how he cares about America's health and wants to protect those with pre-existing conditions, just ask him about this brief. Well, that'll be pointless. You could ask him anything you want. We'll get to that and how bad an idea it is to ask him any questions, perhaps after this. It's 100% clear they have asked the Supreme Court to take it all away. All of it. This is, as he puts it, a dereliction of duty, as the DOJ is supposed to defend laws passed by Congress, not actively try and do Trump's bidding to gut them. And it's also just a betrayal of Americans' interests during a pandemic, no less. Unconscionable. And that's the end of his commentary on this. That's a pretty compact statement on it. But another interesting aspect of it pointed out here. Yeah, this is not what the Department of Justice is supposed to be there for. Congress passes a law, and you don't put the succeeding administration's Department of Justice on the job of undoing it. You can agree not to defend it. That has happened. And, as a matter of policy, that's likely to happen from time to time, especially in these times of political extremes. But putting the Department of Justice on the job of dismantling a law like this one in particular, at the feet of which no particular continuing injustice can be laid, then there's really just this has just become an arm of Trump's political operation, such as it is. And it's not easy to identify Trump's political operation either. Just whatever Donald Trump feels like at the moment is pretty much what you get in terms of policy. And maybe that's what people were arguing with Maggie Haberman about this morning. I didn't really want to pay much attention to that one, but perhaps we can circle back on that one. Maybe I should make some show notes for myself. Yes, I have this wonderful notebook here. Maybe I can scribble something about that. Because I did see Haberman making some sort of comment that drew derision earlier this morning, and I think from one of our frequent follows on Twitter is NYC Southpaw, and they were having some interesting discussion. Perhaps we could expand upon that one. Yeah, all right. Well, let's see. Oh, this is a nice note. Athena, thank you. Athena 5000 saying, well, I would be upset if you went back to bed. I could take the microphone. I could just lie there and say, you know what? No screens in front of me. I'm just going to tell you what I'm thinking this morning. Do you think that would make for a good show? I think I need some reminders of what's happening elsewhere around the world. Bill knows what's happening. Bill, in fact, could have told you what was going to happen this morning. I forgot to read his morning tweet. Daily Kos Radio is live now, 10 minutes late at this juncture. Today, host and alleged clinical psychologist Kagro X, I've never seen anyone allege that, talks Donald Trump down off the ledge using, I would never do that, by the way, but using his patented new method by which he spends 2 hours looking up and yelling, jump. Now, there you go. That's true. I'm sorry. I was premature in my dismissal of this. I would absolutely help him down off the ledge that way. Let me help you off this ledge. Hold this 100-pound barbell. Yeah, like that would work. And lean forward. He'd never stay on a ledge. He'd never be able to balance on a ledge. I wouldn't have to talk him down. He'd just lean forward and just flop right off. I don't know what we're talking about. Okay, let's see. I mentioned to you that there were many takes on the Supreme Court thing. One of them shared with us by Charles Pierce, both on Twitter and in one of those magazine things where they write stuff down at length, and then I get to read it. Well, the main theme of it is in his tweet here. We could just take the shortcut, but, Charles Pierce, pretty good writer. Maybe we'll share his take on things here. Republicans, he says in his headline, have set up shop at the crossroads of what? Suicidal politics and homicidal neglect. Yeah, pretty much it. The Trump administration, which he marks with an asterisk, files a brief in support of ripping health care away from tens of millions in the middle of a pandemic. With one of several available choices of ridiculous-looking orange face-painted Donald Trump illustrating the photo. Imagine, for a moment, you're a Republican. You already know that your party has hitched its wagon to the biggest ass, and he means that in many ways, the biggest ass in the history of American politics. And that he has proceeded to bungle a response to the worst public health crisis in a century, touching off a deep recession in the bargain. And this is, by the way, this is actually generous. I mean, one, it's a depression, not a recession, I think, at this point. I don't know, maybe the economists would disagree, but come on. We haven't had this many people out of work since ever. And, people would probably pick a bone or two over the word bungle a response, but I'll allow it. This is at the same time that he and you, because you are a Republican, don't forget how this example works, and the next thing, and this next thing is what you've been doing for 40 years, right? So he and you have placed themselves on the wrong side of the biggest and most vigorous civil rights uprising since the mid-1960s, a roiling combination of the March on Washington and the burning of Watts. Perhaps you're thinking to yourself this morning, maybe this isn't the best historical moment to take health care away from tens of millions of Americans. And then he borrows here from the coverage of NBC News on this subject, reads this way. The late-night brief, filed Thursday in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, carries major implications for the presidential election. If the justices agree, it would cost an estimated 20 million Americans their insurance coverage. This is on top of all the people who are losing their insurance coverage because they lost their jobs, by the way. And it would cost an estimated 20 million Americans their insurance coverage and nullify protections for pre-existing conditions. And Trump loves saying, only I will take care of your pre-existing conditions by killing you see. The Trump administration's brief comes as the U.S. has recorded more than 120,000 deaths from COVID-19. We're well over 126,000 now. We really saw the totals balloon yesterday. Anyway, so over 120,000 deaths from COVID-19 with nearly 2.5 million confirmed cases. Yes, we did pass 2.5 million yesterday. And I have seen that, what's his name over at the CDC says, we likely have about 10 times that number of infections out there. We just haven't caught up to catching them with testing because our testing is so wonderful and robust. Okay. I'll see if I can find that source to show you later on. On Wednesday, the nation hit a new record for the highest daily total of new infections reported with more than 45,500. For the roughly 25 million people out of work and collecting jobless benefits, the ACA's marketplaces and Medicaid expansion provide avenues to gain subsidized health insurance with consumer protections. In the brief, U.S. Solicitor General Noel Francisco, and he is, by the way, also among the DOJ officials resigning on July 3rd, but he's staying for one last punch in the face to all Americans, and other Justice Department officials sided with Texas, of all places, now one of the leading incubators of COVID-19, thank you very much, sided with Texas in a case led by Republican attorneys general, arguing that the requirement for people to buy insurance is no longer valid after Congress scrapped the penalty for noncompliance in 2017. The Justice Department added, the individual mandate is not severable from the rest of the act. So I think most of you are probably up to speed on what has happened here, but I guess long story, extremely short. You'll recall that Republicans complained bitterly, and Tea Party types complained bitterly about this as well, and even Scalia made this his chief complaint against the Affordable Care Act. You don't have the authority to mandate that all American citizens buy insurance, either on the private market or through the Affordable Care Act. That's impermissible, and you can't do it. And they've managed to wrest that away, and of course, to some extent, even elected Democrats have said, all right, if this is your biggest problem, we'll get rid of it. We'll undo it. We'll lower the penalty that you have to pay in taxes if you don't have insurance to zero. And that effectively nullifies it. But refusing to take yes for an answer, Republicans finally admitted to, I think what we all knew, that wasn't actually our actual problem with the law. That was what we said our big problem with the law is, but that was just to get you to get rid of it because we didn't like it. But then our plan was to say, well, if you don't have an individual mandate, then the whole law has to go, which is, of course, absurd. There's really no reason why that should be the case. And the Justice Department's argument in favor of it is more or less nonsense. And I think he gets into quoting it later on. But basically all they're saying is, well, if one part of the law is no longer operative, shouldn't the whole thing no longer be operative? As there was no way of amending law. Okay, sure. Well, if the 3/5 clause of the Constitution is no longer valid, isn't the whole Constitution invalid? No, not really the way it works. But back to what Pierce has to say here. We should also note that the administration, has no replacement plan and no intention of cobbling anything that could possibly pass before Election Day, and that the president, also doesn't give a damn one way or the other how many people die. They could drop dead on the White House lawn, and he'd step over them to get to the helicopter so he could cheat at golf for the afternoon, which is, of course, his plan for the weekend. This time he'll be cheating in New Jersey rather than in Virginia, as I understand it. This is also true of the national leadership of the president, party, the president's party. Pretty much true across the board. And speaking of his trip to New Jersey, as I understand it, New York, New Jersey, and I believe Connecticut have joined in their regional compact to announce that since they have falling levels, for the most part, there are some people up there who are willing to sabotage that, but falling levels of COVID-19 prevalence in their area, finally, at long last, after suffering the worst of the pandemic in the United States so far, are asking, or in fact insisting, that out-of-state travelers to the area quarantine themselves for 14 days before going into general circulation inside the state. How you would enforce such a thing, I have no idea, but that's the request. But just to put an exclamation point on it, Trump is going to helicopter in from hotspot Washington, D.C., and play golf there for the week or the weekend, or maybe the whole week. I'm not exactly certain how long he plans on staying, and won't be observing the 2-week quarantine. Although I guess arguably you could say, well, he is self-isolating at his golf/defensive compound in Bedminster, New Jersey. So it's possible he could get away with that one. Anyway, Pierce goes on saying, you may recall, by the way, that the mandate, he was just explaining what we were talking about a minute ago with the ACA. You may recall that the mandate disappeared into the maw of the giant tax cut with which the administration, shoved even more of the country's wealth upwards. This is a marriage of greed and inhumanity unlike any we've seen since the Dawes Act landed on our native populations. You'll have to hit Wikipedia for that one unless you know offhand. But the payoff of this vicious cosmic prank, dropped in the middle of the night on Thursday, comes on page 37 of the Justice Department's brief. This one passage is the death warrant for millions of Americans. Are you ready for the death warrant? Even though the guaranteed issue and community rating provisions are constitutionally valid when standing on their own, it is evident that the Congress would not, quote, have wanted, unquote, them to stand without the individual mandate. And citing a Roberts opinion in the NFIB case, that these provisions are inseverable is evident from the enacted text of the Affordable Care Act, where Congress expressly found that the individual mandate is essential to the operation of the guaranteed issue and community ratings provisions. Now, of course, we don't have it, and it's still operating, so I guess it's not that essential, but that's what they say Congress said. Congress expressly found that the individual mandate is essential to the operation of the guaranteed issue and community rating provisions. If there were no requirement to purchase insurance, Congress concluded, many individuals would wait to purchase health insurance until they needed care. But by significantly increasing health insurance coverage, the mandate, together with the other provisions of this act, will minimize this adverse selection and broaden the health insurance risk pool to include healthy individuals, which will lower health insurance premiums. For that reason, Congress concluded, they say, the individual mandate is essential to creating effective health insurance markets in which improved health insurance products that are guaranteed issue and do not exclude coverage of pre-existing conditions can be sold. The requirement is essential to creating effective health insurance markets, they're saying, quoting the Congress itself, that do not require underwriting and eliminate its associated administrative costs. This is the administration saying that, hey, we killed the individual mandate so our friends could get fatter, and the individual mandate was essential to the operation of the act. So sorry, campers, you no longer are protected from losing your health insurance due to pre-existing conditions like, say, the lingering effects of the virus that has caused the pandemic that the president, asterisk, has so studiously ignored. Anything any Republican says to the contrary hereafter is a lie unless they come out firmly against this lawsuit. Well, that's basically it. Plus, of course, I think the DOJ and administration's argument is to say, ignore what you see happening in front of you. That is to say, the operation of the Affordable Care Act independent of the individual mandate, and pretend that the Congress was in fact right, that without the individual mandate in place, there was no way the law could function, and simply award them the points for having had the foresight to predict that which did not actually happen, when we can instead pretend that it did, and then kill the whole thing. I mean, they thought that that was going to be logically, I mean, it made a certain amount of sense that the two things were inextricably tied. But then they found out that they weren't for whatever weird reason. I mean, essentially, economists just have to go back and try and figure out why is it that people continued to price the insurance relatively affordably and people continued to buy it even though it wasn't mandated that they do so, when you thought the only reason that they would buy it is that it would be mandated, and the only reason you thought that insurers would agree to provide insurance affordably through the exchanges is because there was universality in coverage, and therefore, the risk could be spread out and premiums could be lowered. But that turned out not to be the case, which I guess just tells you a little something, well, one, about the economic understanding of the insurance markets when you're buying health, essentially. I guess it's a little less elastic than they thought. And two, look, observed reality is that this is working, and in order to buy the administration's argument, you have to pretend it's not, and that you don't see it working. And ironically, in order to make our lawsuit effective as Republicans, you have to buy into the Democratic argument, which we rejected then and we reject now. So it's a little awkward, to say the least. I don't think that there was enough attention given to that. Anyway, so yes, Pierce continues and then concludes. Right, I guess I'll recap here. This is the administration saying, hey, we are the ones that killed the individual mandate so that we could give a big tax cut to the rich, and the individual mandate was essential to the operation of the act, according to Democrats. So, sorry, you no longer are protected from losing your insurance due to pre-existing conditions like this pandemic. And anything any Republican says to the contrary hereafter is a lie unless they come out firmly against this lawsuit. And even then, Every damn one of them should bear the burden and pay the price for ripping health care away from millions of Americans in the middle of a pandemic just because the twisted child in the White House got mocked at a banquet several years ago. That's how we got here. They own every death. How do you sleep, Noel Francisco? I guess he'll sleep better after July 3rd. While you make your argument, can you hear the sound of a million ragged breaths from people dying at home because their lungs are turning to cement? And so, here you are, Noel, and here the rest of them are too, setting up shop at the crossroads where suicidal politics collides with homicidal neglect. Timing, after all, is everything. Okay. That's a pretty good summary of where we stand on the Affordable Care Act lawsuit. I think pretty well wrapped up there. We got our first break coming up here, and I can dive into the what we have stored away in pocket to try and plan for the rest of the day. I guess we won't be able to fit this one in here. This is an awkward spot, as we'll have like about 30 seconds before our music plays. But so much of what I put away for today is in the form of tweets, and unfortunately, it's the pocket's still not entirely up to speed again on how to display those things. I can see, I'm reminding myself of what's behind these tweets and what's stored in pockets. So I'm looking forward to the next segment. We'll say it that way as we get ready for our, there it is, the outro music. Apparently Trump passed some happy time on television yesterday with Sean Hannity. A little recap of the dumbest of that dumb appearance coming up, courtesy of Daniel Dale. After this, we can get to that, and some reminders from Empty Wheel about what else is going on over at DOJ in their continuing effort to erase all of history for the benefit of Donald Trump. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back down to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, let's see if I can't get everything set up so I can see all of the various channels in here. Okay. Checking on things just to make sure that no major stories have changed. Daniel Dale, as you know, always useful in tracking various and sundry to invoke the spirit of Greg Dworkin here. The lies of Donald Trump uttered on television, whether during his rallies or interviews or official events or what have you. This was very interesting, though. Just deeply indicative of the hole we're in here. A transcript of Trump's response when he was asked by Sean Hannity, maybe the most softball of softball questions, asked, what are his top priorities for a second term? You are, of course, running for a second term, running for re-election as President of the United States. Surely there is a reason for this, sir. Name one of those reasons. Hannity puts it this way. If you hear in 131 days from now, and remember how long that is, 131 days from now, at some point in the night or early in the morning, we can now project Donald J. Trump has been re-elected the 45th President of the United States. Let's talk. What's at stake in this election as you compare and contrast, and what are your top priority items for a second term? Really, no matter how you slice this question, it is not answered, it is not even remotely approached by Donald Trump. He doesn't have the kind of mind, that can work on the fly to answer a question like this. But which is he can't answer any question. That's amazing all by itself. But here, the most generalized, most softball question imaginable is posed to him, and he can't even find his way close to an answer. And there's no right answer in this. But I don't know. I guess here's the thing. I'll say my reaction ahead of time. I want you to listen to this answer and envision instead a different circumstance. Donald Trump isn't, a celebrity. He isn't super wealthy, and he isn't. But if we all acknowledge that, and he's not president of the United States, but he's being interviewed perhaps by social workers, family services workers, perhaps, interviewing him in front of his children. The upshot here being we need to determine whether or not Mr. Trump is capable of continuing to live on his own or needs to be moved into some kind of elder care situation, either involuntarily or whatever. But, does he have the capability to care for himself in his current situation? And so, there are various, questions that they might ask. This wouldn't necessarily be one of them. What are your plans for your second term as president of the United States? So we have to analogize, but you see what he's being asked here. So what are your top priority items for a second term? That's the end of the question. So that's the last phrase of it. It's not like that's the buried nugget in Hannity's paragraph. And Trump answering as only he can. Well, one of the things that would be really great, the word experience is still good. All right, we're already off the rails. What are your top priorities? One of the things that would be really great. Yeah. No, I'm not going to finish that sentence. The word experience, is still good. True. I always say talent is more important than experience. I've always said that. But the word experience is a very important word. It's a very important meaning. I never did this before. I never slept over in Washington. I was in Washington, I think, 17 times. And all of a sudden, I'm president of the United States. You know the story. I'm riding down Pennsylvania Avenue with our first lady. And I say, this is great. But I didn't know very many people in Washington. It wasn't my thing. I was from Manhattan, from New York. Now I know everybody. And I have great people in the administration. You make some mistakes, like, an idiot like Bolton. And all he wants to do is drop bombs on everybody. You don't have to drop bombs on everybody. You don't have to kill people. And that's the end of the excerpt. Like I said, we don't get around to anything close to, and here's what I'm going to do with the second term. Or here are the things that I think are important in America, whether it's part of my second term or I plan to address them or not. What do you like about America? Well, there's a word, and it's a word, and it's still a word, and it's a good word, and it means a thing. And many people say, I was there with the great First Lady, and we're walking down the street, and I've never been here before, but now all of a sudden I am here, and I know all these people. And sometimes there's an idiot, and I hate him, and he's terrible. And you don't have to do these terrible things. That's it. Thank you. That's the answer. What are you looking at me for? I don't understand why you're staring at me. I mean, seriously, that's it. That's his answer. And at which point, I guess you say, sorry, Ms. Trump, Ms. Kushner, your father, it's my assessment that he's really just incapable of taking care of himself. It's good that he's got a staff that can take care of him now, and we might be able to continue this living situation if you have got the means of at-home care, but we're going to recommend that somebody look in on him daily, and if it can't be you, if you can't guarantee that you're personally able to look in on him daily or take care of his needs, then you're going to need to hire a service to do it. I'm just not sure he's going to be able to bathe or feed himself. This is not a problem. Like for Donald Trump, he doesn't, do those things for himself anyway because he's alleged to be wealthy, and so we excuse it that way. Well, he has somebody prepare his meals for him even when he's not president of the United States. Whereas, if he were just a regular person without access to these means, he might be in trouble this way. And they might say, yeah, we need some sort of assisted living situation. I saw earlier today our friend Grudging One on Twitter making fun of the same thing. The word experience is a very important word. It has an important meaning. Thanksgiving used to be called Walking Bird Day. I'm riding with, I call her our First Lady. And, we always loved Walking Bird with all the trimmings. Yeah, okay. Whatever, man. You're like off in outer space. The question is, what are you going to do with the most important office in the world if it is returned to your control 131 days from now? Have you given it any thought, sir? There's a word, and I don't know what that word is, but the word has meaning, and meaning is an interesting thing, and I'm glad we have it. And anyway, I was saying, this is great. 17 times I was here, but I never slept here. Now I do. All of a sudden, I'm president. Can you believe it? Anyway, hi. How are you? I mean, I don't know what to tell you. We're not getting out of this pandemic. We're not getting out of any of it. The pandemic at this point is almost the least of our problems. I mean, between this and the protests and the depression, I can't pick one of those things that he would be able to address in any measurable way. But no, we're not getting out of this thing. And as Hannity reminds us here, it's 131 days till we find out who's going to be president for the next 4 years. But it's 7 long months until we are actually done with this guy's term. If he finishes it. And we're 4 months into the pandemic for the United States. Say March, April, May, June. Not quite done with June yet, but, the pandemic, I guess we had our first cases here certainly before March, but we weren't talking about infections and deaths at pandemic levels in the United States until at least March. So about 4 months, maybe if you want to be generous, 5 months of pandemic so far. But really we weren't seeing, huge numbers of infections and deaths until March. I'm going to give it 4 months. 125,000 dead so far. More, of course, but 125,000 is the ballpark figure we're going with this morning. I guess we can check in with the worldometers and find out exactly where we stand at the moment. All right, 126,823. So about to go over 127,000. So 130,000 is in our sights here. 4 months, 130,000 dead. We got 7 months until we're rid of this guy if we manage to defeat him in the election, which by all real indications we should be able to do relatively easily, but with all the cheating going on, who knows what's going on. And this is if he agrees to leave at the end of his term. We have that worry out there too. We used to worry about that with a lot of people, but it's never been more serious than now when you have this guy. Airplanes are invisible, windmill cancer, paints his face orange. He thinks testing causes COVID. He says things like this when he's asked, what do you want to do with the presidency? We're not sure whether he's going to leave. So 125,000 dead in 4 months. We got 7 months to go. And he's talking like this. I mean, there's just no way out of this, right? The unemployment rate, I guess, just will continue to climb. Deaths will continue to climb. I think one of the official outlets for these kind of estimates now says, well, we'll probably be around 150,000 dead by the end of July, which it's now starting to look like will be maybe a little, I don't know. I don't know whether we're going to make it out of July at just 150. So maybe we'll breach that. And all I have to go on are the numbers that had been slowing down recently. And the deaths number is dropping, and we did discuss that briefly with Greg yesterday, that infections are taking root among a younger population, which is not good healthcare news by any stretch of the imagination. But if your only focus is deaths, we may see a reduced number there just because infecting a younger cohort typically, so far anyway, has resulted in lower numbers of deaths. What we can't say for sure is how good is of what quality is the recovery, if there is such a thing as recovery from COVID-19. But we just don't know that yet. We may yet see the numbers spike, though. We may find out, infecting a younger cohort, which wasn't really happening very much before, might just result in deaths among a younger cohort. We have to wait a few weeks. That's sort of a lagging indicator on this thing. And with the spike in the number of infections, we're also going to see the younger cohort carry the disease right straight back to that older cohort, which does relatively reliably die from COVID-19. And we may see those numbers rise again. And if they start approaching the old rates, then we'll see 150,000 deaths relatively quickly, and then we'll see it spike and balloon past 200,000 deaths by the end of the summer. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that the administration was pinning its hopes to 60,000 total deaths by August. And of course, we blew past that and we didn't make it we made it to end of April before we were at 60,000 deaths. And remember, as I pointed out, a week or two ago, we're now into the positive territory here on more people having died from COVID-19 since Jared Kushner declared the great success story than had died prior to it. We are just at about 60,000 deaths when he declared the whole thing a great success, and we've more than doubled that. I would say perhaps that by the end of the hot summer months, maybe when we get around to like Labor Day, we might have tripled that number. 180,000 deaths might be in sight by the time the warm weather that was supposed to get rid of this thing goes away. We might have a brief respite if the counter theory of indoor air circulation and air conditioning turns out to be true, right? The warm weather will make it go away. Well, the warm weather is only making it worse because the warm weather is driving people inside to seek air conditioning, where they're giving the virus to one another through because they're in cramped, enclosed quarters. Anyway, I don't know whether the hot weather is getting rid of anything at all, but it doesn't seem to be improving things. Okay, let's see. So many other directions that we can go here, but I guess now I'm reminded of a story I saw circulated yesterday because I'm on the subject of COVID-19 once again. I'll switch directions, and then we'll head back to the legal direction after that, since most of the things I put in pocket since seeing this have to do with the legal situation instead. But COVID-19 now being on the mind, perhaps you saw this one, which I had to circulate yesterday on Twitter. I happened to see it being, I think actually Rachel Bitterkoffer tweeted it into my tweet stream with a slightly different comment. My comment was simple and direct. I'm sorry to hear it. I'm sorry to hear about this story, but effing duh. What is the matter with you? This is just sort of, I guess this will, what do I want to say? I know, this isn't how I wanted to say it, but this is how it's coming out. This will relieve you of all possibility of hope of getting out of this. Unless by it serves as a negative example and wakes people the hell up. But gee whiz, why is this disease coming roaring back, this pandemic coming roaring back? It's because people are doing these stupid things. The problem, perhaps, one of the problems is a lot of the people who are doing stupid things think they're doing smart things. That's bad. Like these guys. This is a report from, who the hell is this? WFAA, which is where is it? It's a news channel. It's a ABC affiliate. Where is WFAA? Is this the local affiliate? Because I never really understand how the W's and the K's work exactly. I guess it used to be a K. Had they just abandoned that whole thing? Like it used to be, the western part of the country was K everything, K ABC and K whatever television radio station, whereas the east was W, and that was sort of reliable. But here, WFAA is in Dallas, which really I usually think of as K territory. And then I said, look it up. I'll look it up in Wikipedia and find out where it's based. And it's in Dallas. And it says the former call signs of WFAA were KBTV. So it was a K and it became a W. How does that happen? One of you probably knows that answer offhand, but it's a baffling bit for me. But a good distraction because really, honestly, this is such a stupid and depressing story. But WFAA is responsible for this stupid and depressing story. North Texas family shaken. Shaken. That's like dramatically shaken. Yes, thank you. North Texas family shaken after 18 relatives test positive for COVID-19. How do you get the 18 and the 19? That was another one of the things, I guess, from the other night. I don't know where Trump pulled that one. What's the 19? I can't understand it. Right? 18 relatives test positive for COVID-19 following family gathering. Well, how could you be shaken? Well, I mean, I'm shaken. I'm sorry. I'm upset that 18 people in this family are sick. But I mean, at least it doesn't say North Texas family baffled after 18 relatives test positive after family gathering. But it might as well. 3 are now hospitalized, including 2 elderly family members and 1 woman battling breast cancer. So just another challenge on top of that. Thanks very much. And it's illustrated by a picture, maybe a still from a video, and this is probably the video of the interview with the family, etc. But it's very obvious how they spread the disease. There are, how many of them in this picture? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them in this picture at their family gathering. And how do you get 8 people in your basic snapshot type of photo? Only if they're tightly grouped together. What are we not supposed to be doing in America or anywhere in the world right now during this pandemic? This. The Dateline, Carrollton, Texas. As North Texas watches COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations surge, one family is shouldering a health crisis that they never expected to face. I need some more sound effects, like the slide whistle. That crisis all began on May 30th, when just a single relative, unknowingly infected with COVID-19, take note of the term, though, unknowingly infected. There's a lot involved in this. And, of course, that's how this stuff spreads, right? I didn't know I had it. Well, that's why we ask you to wear a mask. But I didn't. How was I supposed to know? You're not supposed to know. You're all supposed to wear masks generally because it's just too hard. There's just too much nuance to tell non-medical people, well, if you check you're this and you're that and you perform this antibody test and then you'll know whether you have it or not. Just assume you have it because it's entirely possible for you to have it and exhibit no symptoms. And wear your mask and stay distant from people. And then even if you have it and you don't know it, you won't give it to anyone. It won't be possible for you to give it to anyone if they don't get close enough to you. It's easy. That's real, that's scientific, that's medical, and you can make it work. And it's easy, but you won't do it. But okay, unknowingly infected with COVID-19, this person interacted with 7 family members at a surprise birthday party. And these 7 family members later tested positive because germ theory, this is the way it goes. It moves from one body to the next and then other people get infected. Now, Ron Barbosa is keeping track of 18 people in his family who have tested positive for COVID-19. Per Barbosa, and they use per Barbosa at least twice in this article. It's kind of weird phrasing, but per Mr. Barbosa here, those 7 family members contracted and spread the virus to 10 other relatives, either at the party or through other family interactions, because that's how germs work. Barbosa didn't attend the party himself. That's relatively smart, but you have less and less respect for him as the story goes on. Barbosa didn't attend the party himself, but the celebration was for his daughter-in-law, who turned 30. So it wasn't like, oh my gosh, we can't deny our 5-year-old a birthday party. A 30-year-old had to be denied a birthday party. Now, my brother turned 50 during this pandemic. We Zoomed. We did a FaceTime and called him up and sang happy birthday to him. Everyone wanted to be there for his 50th birthday, but you can't. But in North Texas, you can because, duh. because we're in Texas and things aren't real here. Okay, so here's the deal. Barbosa didn't attend the party himself, but the reception was for his daughter-in-law who turned 30. However, Barbosa's nephew hosted. Okay, and that nephew, Barbosa said, is the one who was unknowingly infected. So you can see, what a problem it is. It'll be safe because I don't have COVID-19. So everyone can come to my house and gather for this surprise birthday party for the 30-year-old who just has never grown up and can't get over. All right, everyone wants to have a birthday party. But still, seriously, it's a pandemic. Grow up. You're 30 years old. Stop having birthday parties in the middle of pandemics. Wait a while. But no, we're going to have it, and we're going to have it at my cousin's house or whatever, Barbosa's nephew. It's safe. I don't have COVID-19. He's the one who's unknowingly infected, and he invites all these people over to his house, and then they all get infected from it. Now, this is the one of many kickers in this. He's unknowingly infected, right? So you can imagine how that would happen. I'm asymptomatic, right? Wrong. I'm symptomatic, but unknowingly infected, because it says here he had a cough, and he thought, well, this is a slight cough that I have here, but it's not COVID-19, and I'm sure no one wants to assume things are COVID-19. But what do they do? Everywhere you go someplace, you got to be screened. Do you have a cough? No. Well, by which I mean yes. But it's a slight cough. Oh, tell me about your slight cough. Well, don't worry about it, he says. It's a slight cough, which I think is the byproduct of working in construction. Because construction causes coughs. And I mean, it can. Sawdust, whatever. I'm allergic. Did you wear a mask? It probably wore a mask when he was dealing with the sawdust, but not when he's dealing with the pandemic, right? But what causes it? What is it about working in construction that makes you say, yeah, of course I have a slight cough. I work in construction. Do you have asbestosis? That's a serious issue. Maybe you should see your doctor about that. No, good news is, I got good news and bad news. The good news is you don't have asbestosis. The bad news is you're about to host a surprise birthday party in your apartment or your house or whatever, and you have COVID-19 and you might kill your whole family. But, I'm unknowingly affected, except for the knowledge I have of a possible infection. But I'm going to ignore it because the party. You see? I don't want to be a party pooper. Before the party, by the way, this nephew played golf with a few family members who also attended the event, according to Barbosa. That's just a side note, another opportunity to have infected them. I'm sure they didn't do a particularly good job distancing themselves. Though I am assured that you can distance yourself during golf. The thing is, your foursome has to all ride in separate carts, and you can't gather on the tee and or at the pin and joke around and then go in for lunch or drinks. You got to stay distant, and I'm sure they didn't. Evidently, they didn't because everybody's sick now. Even though everyone did their best to stay socially distant, and I'm staring at the picture of them in the big giant group hug, taking the photo of themselves. I did my best to stay socially distant, except for those times at which I did not. Barbosa said it likely wasn't enough, as he suspects the party may have been a catalyst for the spread, though there's no way to truly know. There is. He also said it could have happened when his nephew went golfing beforehand with relatives. Yeah, although, again, I mean, basically that's just part of the party, right? Everybody's hanging around, going to be coming by later on for the surprise birthday party. Let's play golf beforehand. Well, it could have happened when you were in the kitchen, but it might have happened when you were in the living room. Does it really make a difference? Barbosa added that his family is around each other constantly, and that no one is to blame for this, underscoring that they care for each other dearly. They just don't care to follow any of the rules. It wasn't that long. Barbosa is very upset about this, you can see. And I mean, he should be, but in a different way. It wasn't that long. We're doing our best to stay socially distant, except that we have group hugs and we play golf and we do surprise parties. And after all, we're always constantly together, which, again, this is where people are like, well, they're family members, so that's okay. Not extended family who live in different homes. If you live constantly with your immediate family, and there are 5 of you in there together, you can work and walk and play together as a family group. Yes, because you're constantly exposed to one another. And if one has it, you'll all have it regardless anyway. But if you're all healthy, we can assume that you're all healthy for the same reason. You don't have it. That may be true, but you can't expose yourself to other families, which is exactly what they're doing here. And now he's really surprised. How could it have gotten to all 18 of these other family members? After all, they didn't spend that much time together. Do remember that, one of the rules is you stay 6 feet distant, even though really the droplets can travel further. You stay masked, you wash your hands. You don't let yourself be exposed to somebody who may have been infected for more than 15 minutes or so at close proximity. Well, Barbosa says they didn't do that. They weren't together for all that long. It was at most a couple of hours. That's longer than 15 minutes. That's the way time works. It wasn't that long. It was only a couple of hours, says Barbosa, who, of course, understands all things medical because he is a volunteer EMT. But that's not enough. There's more. He's a volunteer EMT, but during that brief time, the couple of hours, which is, several times longer than you actually need to become infected, during that brief time, somehow the other 18 family members are now infected with COVID. Womp womp. I'm sad about that. But, that's the expected conclusion. I just don't understand that. Now, Barbosa, we find out, is also married to a doctor. Mrs. Barbosa? Maybe another Mr. Barbosa, for all I know, is married as a doctor. No, and he said his wife refused to go to the party due to safety reasons. So smart. And Ron didn't go to the party. He's smart, too. They knew what was likely to happen at something like that if someone was unknowingly infected. They just didn't tell any of their nieces and nephews. Or maybe they did and they just wouldn't listen. But still. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I can't believe how much time I feel like I just want to admonish these people. I really should stop shaming them, I guess. But it's hard not to, and I don't know. Maybe what I'm really trying to do here is shame any of you, not you, but help you shame other people who might otherwise consider risking something so stupid as all this. I'm just looking at all the mistakes that they make, and they say right here to the reporters, we are careful. We do social distancing. We did our best. But that social distancing happens to include large family gatherings across extended family for several hours, for golf and parties, and even briefer interactions with them that we think of as possibly they could have been done safely. There are some other things in here. Story continues. But look, stay away from people. Don't do these things. That's all there is to it. You just have to execute that. But these guys can't do it, and that's why we're doomed. These people think they're knowledgeable and are executing on the instructions. And they're baffled as to, how could we have? Well, you violated all of the rules. It doesn't take much. People forget about, degrees of separation. I'm 6 feet away or whatever. That seems to be fine, except for the one person who's in my immediate family group who I allow to get close to me, but then I forget what else has that person been doing, and that's how germs spread. So, okay, let's see. They went golfing. They only spent a couple of hours together, and they're still puzzled, and he's an EMT. She's a doctor. However, it was a party that by current they're talking about the party, right? Barbosa and his wife refused to go to the party due to safety reasons. However, it was a party that by current state health standards, but remember, you're talking about Texas, which is crazy and doesn't have health standards, right? By current state health standards, appeared harmless, considering it was just family. And here, ABC News or WFAA really falls down on the job here. It didn't appear harmless. It sounds harmless to stupid people who don't have any understanding of what the rules are and why the rules are what they are. It's just family. Yeah, I know. But again, do you know what the difference between immediate family and extended family is? I mean, it may be that most people just don't know. Immediate, that means they're your family right now. Extended, that means we're all, I don't know what. I'm not actually sure what extended means, so I don't know. So by current state health standards, it's fine because it's just family. No, it's not. A total of 25 people attended, Barbosa said, and not all, well, hold on a second. But 25 people attended. Now, that's something that a lot of states in their phases of reopening will say, well, you can have gatherings of up to 25 people. And that's not obviously immediate family. That has to include more people, for most people, other than what was the name of that crazy family, the Duggars. Maybe they probably didn't even have 25. So, okay, but you can have gatherings of 25 people, but they're supposed to be socially distanced and masked, et cetera, et cetera. So you can't just throw 9/10 of the rules out the window and say, we were observing the 25, limitation. Yeah, but with no masks and no social distancing and across family groups and for several hours and indoors and all those things. So anyway, Barbosa, though, is still puzzled. A total of 25 people attended. That's right up to the limit, or maybe even below the limit in Texas. Could probably have 25,000 people at a gathering in Texas. And not all of them arrived at the same time or stayed for the same duration. What is it? This is not a lab report you're writing here. You don't have to all stay for the same time in order to find out the laboratory results of, exposure time. If you stay for long enough to get infected, that's all there is to it. And if you, over here, stay twice as long as it takes to get infected, you're both still infected. It doesn't make any difference. They didn't stay for the same amount of time. When people started getting sick, Barbosa says, we really let everyone have it. We were very angry about this, and I can understand. We knew this was going to happen. I mean, this whole time has been, this whole time this has been going on, we've been terrified. But they apparently they didn't have the juice with the youngins to get them to not have this party, and that can happen. Sometimes people are defiant. Among those infected are 2 young children. They don't get it, right? 2 grandparents. Oh, they reliably get it. But what the F? Let's have the party anyway. And a cancer patient and Barbosa's parents who are in their 80s. This is terrific. So, 3 are now hospitalized. Barbosa's parents, Frank and Carol, along with his sister Kathy, who is battling breast cancer. So exactly the ones that you would predict would come down with it, did in fact come down with it. And here's a picture of Ron Barbosa with his mother, Carol. He's taking, I don't know, is he taking her to the hospital or what? It's a photo. He's buckling her into her car seat. It's good, car safety. He's got on gloves. He's got on a mask. I don't know whether it's actually N95, but it's, the tight fit style, and he's got a face shield on over that. He's taking care. She's not wearing anything. Whatever. Where's she going? Probably to the hospital. Kathy, per Barbosa, is recovering and feeling better despite contracting the virus while simultaneously undergoing chemo treatments. That can't be tough. He says she didn't attend the party. She's smart too, but she's still got it. But Barbosa's parents are in a much tougher situation. Frank and Carol were high school sweethearts, and have been married for almost 68 years. Barbosa said it's likely Carol who infected Frank after she interacted with a family member outside the party briefly. And again, I guess I'm stunned. Did you go to the party? No. Except for the time I went to the party. Well, I was outside the party. I didn't go in. Well, but you went. Why did you go? Well, I had to do something. Let's see. One of them had to drop something off, maybe whatever. She was contributing food to the party. I don't know. Did you talk to anybody while you were at the party? I didn't go to the party. I stayed outside of the party. All right. Well, when you dropped off the food, was it contactless? Did you put it on the stoop and ring the doorbell like a Pizza Hut delivery person? No, of course not. It's my family. They came out and they took the thing from me, and I talked to them for a little bit, and then I left. And so what happened was they infected you when you had the non-contactless delivery to the party. And then where'd you go? I went home to see my elderly husband. Well, now we know how it happened. Barbosa said it's likely Carol who infected Frank after she interacted with a family member outside the party briefly, so it can't happen. It was brief. Carol has been hospitalized since June 13th, and Frank has been in a hospital since June 17th. Frank is in the ICU and on life support. Barbosa told WFAA he is inches away from being put on a ventilator. My dad's hanging on by a thread. They're saying this is one of the last straws for my dad. Visitation is mostly restricted, meaning calls to Barbosa's parents are vital. That's really the best medicine. You know they're in there by themselves with no family, Barbosa said, holding back tears. It's heartbreaking. Of course, really the best medicine would have been for them to have stayed home and not just wandered by to be in close proximity to a party of super spreaders for a few minutes. Just stay home. But I have to bring my casserole. Get someone else to do it. Put it on your porch. Let them pick it up and go away. All right. Well, there's more. They talk about the need for plasma donations, particularly from those who have recovered from COVID-19. That's an important part, too. Although apparently you can't just go and give plasma during a shortage like this. They say they won't let you just donate plasma and earmark it for Frank Barbosa. But I don't know whether that's necessarily really the case, but it sounds like the sort of bureaucratic nightmare that might stand in the way of things. But there you have it. I mean, that's the end of the major part of the story here. And I only pass that on because, well, one, it's Friday and I feel like it. And two, you are living in a country full of people who say, I believe in the coronavirus. I believe in the pandemic. I believe we should be wearing masks. I just want it for, a couple of hours to go to a party with all of my friends and family. And yes, he has a cough, but that's because he works in construction. Everybody knows about construction cough. What the hell are you talking about? Now, I'm only going to play golf. That only takes like a couple seconds to play golf. Notoriously long-lasting game. I'm only going to the party for a few hours. I'm only talking to one person who went to the party for a few minutes. And I did it outside the party. But to no avail. Apparently, I think I don't know whether I missed it or they edited it out of the story, decided that wasn't necessarily the case. But I think the sister, Kathy, who was the one undergoing chemotherapy for breast cancer, I think she went to the party. I thought I read this earlier, but she stayed on the porch outside. So the young people were inside having the party proper, and she stayed outside to be socially distanced from them. But I mean, if she stayed there and nobody came to visit her, then there was probably very little reason to stay on the porch as opposed to staying home. But, maybe she decided to do that. I just want to hear a party going on. Now, possible. Somebody might decide that was what they wanted to do. But my guess is that people came out, and we'll just go out one at a time, and we'll stay, my estimation, of 6 feet away. And maybe I won't wear a mask. And maybe I'm wrong about that 6 feet. Or maybe I'm a loud talker, and my droplets go further than 6 feet. And now she's infected. She's getting better, but she's infected. Who else is she giving it to? I don't know. Is she continuing with her chemo treatments? Well, of course, they're extremely important. She's battling breast cancer. She can't stop going to chemo. Where is she getting her chemo treatments? In the hospital. In the hospital with all the other chemo patients. Oh, boy. Hey, gee whiz. I hope that went well. I hope they're keeping her as isolated as you possibly can in a chemotherapy type setting. Maybe it's easier than I think. I don't know. I felt like that story needed some time on the air. I had to work that one out. All right. Here's the the story about Trump going golfing for the weekend up in New Jersey and the isolation orders. Trump won't follow New Jersey quarantine order. He's not a civilian, White House says. Anyone who is in close proximity to him, including staff, guests, and press, are tested for COVID-19 and confirmed to be negative, a spokesman said. Yes, Joe Biden scored some points the other day, in my estimation, by pointing out while Trump is closing down all the federal support for testing centers, while he's joking / not joking about slowing down the testing, Biden points out, there's only going to be one federally funded testing center in America, and it's the one in the White House that makes sure that nobody comes near him without being tested. That's exactly what you would think. I mean, if you were making a joke at the outset of the pandemic, the only thing we can do is, mask and stay distant and test. How many testing centers do you predict Donald Trump will establish for the federal government? I think the joke answer would have been 1, to test everybody who comes near him. Except now that's reality. Well, anyway, there you have it. CNBC actually reporting this. It's on the NBC News site, though, because, they're related. They're extended family. I hope they infect one another. The White House said Wednesday that President Donald Trump will not change his plan to travel to New Jersey this weekend, despite a new order by the governor requiring visitors who have been in states with high numbers of coronavirus cases to quarantine for 14 days. Now, D.C. is a bit of a hot spot all by itself, but of course, where has he been in the last couple? Have you done any traveling in the last couple of days? They'll ask you if you want to take, so say go have your teeth cleaned by a dentist. I have been to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I've been to Arizona and Wisconsin and Washington, D.C., and maybe a few other places. Last 2 weeks, I don't know. Yeah, he's probably been all over the place. Yeah, we're going to say no at this point. So, I mean, all his travel alone should require him to quarantine for 14 days. But, this guy. I'm the president. I don't have to listen to governors. I outrank them. I will overrule them. The White House, spokesman Judd Deere saying the president of the United States is not a civilian when asked about Trump's compliance with the quarantine order given his travel Tuesday to Arizona, which has seen a rise in the rate of its COVID-19 cases. We test people around him all the time, blah, blah, blah. With regard to Arizona, the White House followed its COVID mitigation plan to ensure the president did not come in contact with anyone who was symptomatic or had not been tested, the spokesman added. Anyone traveling in support of the president this weekend will be closely monitored for symptoms and tested for COVID, and therefore pose little to no risk to the local populations, except for the dozens of Secret Service agents who are supposedly sidelined and in quarantine as well. But they were close to the president. I thought they were tested. Well, whatever. The point is, flim flam. Look over there. Bright lights, loud noises. We're going to New Jersey. So, there's that, which is fun. And, whatever. We're not gonna be able to deal with this either. Let's see. Other fun stories to share. I mentioned an empty wheel thread back on the topic of what's going on over at Department of Justice. Just thought I would share these 3 or 4 tweets from Empty Wheel on this one, summarizing what's going on one side of the Justice Department's operations. Outside of the Affordable Care Act shenanigans, there are these shenanigans. She says, so far we know that Barr, Attorney General Barr, intervened to try to prevent a long prison term for Roger Stone that might make him chatter, that is, might make him talk either to the press or to other prisoners or who knows, to spill the beans on Trump, essentially. So that's why they needed to make sure that he wasn't going to spend that long in jail or any time at all if they could help it. Plus, of course, they didn't care enough to try and guarantee him the ability to skip a prison term because he's just a good friend of Trump. Trump stabs all of his people in the back. Anyway, what they really wanted, though, was to make sure that he didn't say, well, hell, I'll spill the beans and I'll cooperate with the prosecution if it means I get to go to jail for less time. I don't know if that was on offer at the moment, but entirely possible. But then, Empty Wheel continues, Barr intervened to prevent Mike Flynn from doing prison time, perhaps as a reward for neglecting to remember whether Trump had ordered his comments about sanctions. We now learn Bill Barr was also trying to undo the Michael Cohen prosecution after the fact, which is even crazier than what he's trying with Flynn. I should try and find myself an update, full story on what he's doing with Cohen. He sprung, though, both Cohen, who was in a prison with COVID cases, and Manafort, who was not, I don't think, in a situation where he was likely to contract COVID-19. But he sprang both Cohen and Manafort from prison, so these rich men can serve their quote-unquote time on their living room couch, where the rest of us are, and we're non-criminals. Now he appears to be preventing Stone from even going to prison in the first place, much less just trying to reduce his sentence. I should try and find out, where's the news about what has happened with Michael Cohen. He must be in the news, although Google News is a much less useful tool than it used to be. They definitely changed the way they are presenting things, so it's not entirely clear. Yeah. Let's see. No, I don't know. I can't come up with the, maybe Empty Wheel herself, maybe during the next break, I can check her timeline and see if she's pointing to some other info about what's going on there. All right, let's see. Just wanted to at least update you on that. The fact that there are so many ongoing cases in which Barr is intervening in trying to reduce sentences for people already convicted in their connections, in crimes connected to Trump world. Let's see. There's another article from the New York Times, which I put away, but also if I look back in Pocket, I think I put alongside it the tweet that brought it to my attention that digs out the best nugget. That's one of the things I'm trying to do to try and save time on the show, and it's not working very well. But here's Eli Honig, the CNN legal analyst, who tweeted his favorite particular nugget from the doubtless much longer than just the nugget New York Times piece. Absolutely outrageous, he says. Barr tried to get the Southern District of New York to undo, here we are, this is the answer I was looking for, undo the part of the Michael Cohen conviction that implicated the president, per the New York Times. But the SDNY resisted, which helps explain last weekend's attempted takeover. Now we can go to the New York Times article and read it in long form. Inside Barr's effort to undermine prosecutors in New York. The firing of the top federal prosecutor in Manhattan was foreshadowed by a disagreement over a case linked to President Trump. We get a little bit of light on what was going on behind the scenes here. Benjamin Weiser, Ben Protes, Katie Benner, and William K. Rashbaum get the byline for the Times, this June 25th article. Shortly after he became Attorney General last year, William P. Barr set out to challenge a signature criminal case that touched President Trump's inner circle directly, and even the president's own actions. The prosecution of Michael D. Cohen, Mr. Trump's longtime fixer. His new fixer, of course, is Barr. The debate between Mr. Barr and the federal prosecutors who brought the case against Mr. Cohen was one of the first signs of a tense relationship that culminated last weekend in the abrupt ouster of Jeffrey S. Berman, the United States Attorney in Manhattan. It also foreshadowed Mr. Barr's intervention in the prosecutions of other associates of Trump. By the time Barr was sworn into office in February, Cohen, who had paid hush money to an adult film star who said she had an affair with Mr. Trump, had already pleaded guilty and was set to begin a 3-year prison sentence, all of which embarrassed and angered the president. But Barr spent weeks in the spring of 2019 questioning the prosecutors over their decision to charge Cohen with violating campaign finance laws, according to people briefed on the matter. At one point during the discussions, Barr instructed Justice Department officials in Washington to draft a memo outlining legal arguments that could have raised questions about Cohen's conviction and undercut similar prosecutions in the future, according to the people briefed on the matter. Sounds like exactly what the Justice Department ought to be doing. Let's see if we can find ways to uncriminalize things that were done by the president's friends. The prosecutors in New York resisted the effort, people said, and a Justice Department official said that Barr did not instruct them to withdraw the case. The department official, who was not authorized to speak publicly about the matter, noted that Cohen was convicted and sentenced in December of 2018 before Barr was sworn in, so there was little he could do to change the outcome of the case. Still, Barr's unexpected involvement in such a politically sensitive case suggested that he planned to exert influence over prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, long known for operating independently of Washington. Barr and other officials have told aides and other U.S. attorneys that the Southern District needs to be reined in. Ultimately, Berman was ousted in a dizzying series of events, heightening the criticism that Trump and Barr were purging the government of people perceived as disloyal to the White House. In an interview with NPR on Thursday, Barr said Berman was, quote, living on borrowed time from the beginning because the president had not appointed him. And when Jay Clayton, the Securities and Exchange Commission chairman, indicated an interest in running the Manhattan office, Barr said it created an opportunity to put a very strong person as a presidential appointment to that office. I certainly was aware that given the current environment, anytime you make a personnel move, conspiracy theorists will suggest that there's some ulterior motive involved. More than any other federal prosecutor's office, the Manhattan office had pursued investigations that angered Mr. Trump. During the case against Cohen, for instance, prosecutors had indicated that Trump directed the hush money payments, although the office was not seeking charges against the president. In addition to prosecuting Cohen, the president's former personal lawyer, the office had also been investigating his current one, Rudy Giuliani, over his actions in Ukraine. Other points of contention included how to proceed against a state-owned Turkish bank that was eventually indicted in an alleged scheme to avoid U.S. sanctions on Iran, and the Justice Department's decision to assign the U.S. attorney in Brooklyn to oversee all investigations into matters related to Ukraine. Berman's office successfully fended off that oversight. The conflict erupted publicly last Friday when Barr announced that Berman was stepping down and would be replaced temporarily by an ally of the administration. Berman then issued his own statement saying he had no intention of resigning. By Saturday afternoon, amid the unusual standoff, Barr informed Berman that Trump had fired him and that he would be replaced temporarily with Berman's own deputy. Barr's role in the Cohen case also presaged his involvement in two other high-profile prosecutions of Trump associates, Michael Flynn, the president's former national security advisor and now international spy, and Roger Stone, a political operative close to Trump who was convicted of lying to Congress and other crimes. Last month, Barr ordered that prosecutors in Washington drop the case against Flynn, who had twice pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about phone calls with the Russian ambassador. Barr also overruled a sentencing recommendation from career prosecutors in Washington for Stone, which he viewed as excessive, prompting the office to backtrack. Even before he became Attorney General, Barr had criticized the special counsel's inquiry into whether Trump had obstructed justice, submitting an unsolicited memo to the Justice Department attacking what he called a novel and legally insupportable reading of the law. Berman had been recused from the case against Cohen for undisclosed reasons, leaving it in the hands of another senior prosecutor in the office, in fact, several of them. In August of 2018, facing the threat of an indictment, Cohen pleaded guilty to personal financial crimes and campaign finance violations, one of which stemmed from a $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels. In pleading guilty, Cohen pointed the finger at the president, saying he had acted at Trump's direction. The New York Times reported previously that Barr had questioned the legal theory of the campaign finance charges against Cohen, but it was not known that the Attorney General went so far as to ask for the draft memo or had raised his concerns more than once. The memo, written by the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, addressed the Southern District's somewhat novel use of campaign finance laws to charge Cohen. Before Cohen's guilty plea, the only person known to face criminal charges for payments meant to keep negative information buried during a political campaign was the former senator and Democratic presidential candidate John Edwards, who was not convicted. Barr argued, among other things, that such cases might be better suited to civil resolutions by the FEC than to criminal prosecutions, according to people with knowledge of the discussions. Cohen, who reported to prison in May of 2019, was recently released on furlough and is currently serving his sentence at his Manhattan home after citing health concerns related to the coronavirus. There is no indication that the Justice Department planned to issue a formal opinion on the campaign finance charges. Such a step, if taken, might have raised questions about the validity of the case against Mr. Cohen and affected any future effort to investigate Trump or others in his circle for similar conduct. They simply decriminalized that. Although the Southern District referred to the president as Individual One in court papers, remember that, and said he directed Cohen to pay the hush money, long-standing Justice Department policy prevents federal prosecutors from pursuing criminal charges against the sitting president. We all know about that. We just have to change the chair he's sitting in and put him in the real chair to begin with. You know the one I'm talking about. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just scanning through Pocket and trying to go a little further and a little deeper to find some of the stories I wanted to share with you. And there are, of course, far too many to get to all of them. Let's finish up with the New York Times piece because there's a couple other mentions that'll put a few other names in your head, probably worth thinking about over the weekend. We left off saying that although the Southern District referred to the president as Individual One in the court papers and said he directed Cohen to pay the hush money, the OLC says, the old OLC memo says, yeah, Justice Department policy, you don't pursue criminal charges against the sitting president. We can rid ourselves of that one. And there's never been a president for whom it's been more important to rid ourselves of that particular opinion. It was written in another time for another president, and this is an unprecedented situation. In July of 2019, the Southern District disclosed in court papers that it had effectively concluded, that's in quotes, the hush money inquiry, and had ended an investigation into whether certain individuals lied to investigators or tried to obstruct the inquiry. At least one of those individuals included a senior executive at Trump's company, according to people with knowledge of that investigation. A spokesman for the Southern District declined to comment on Barr's involvement in the case involving Cohen, as did a spokeswoman for the Justice Department. Barr's maneuvering in the Cohen case was not his only attempt to insert himself in Southern District cases. After Barr was sworn in, one of his first actions was to seek briefings on politically sensitive investigations in the office and elsewhere, people briefed on the discussions said. One matter that Berman's office described to Barr early on was the growing investigation into Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, two Soviet-born businessmen who were helping Giuliani unearth potentially damaging information in Ukraine about Trump's political rivals. You know the one. Berman eventually announced charges against the two men in October of 2019, and the Southern District has continued to investigate whether some of Giuliani's efforts in Ukraine violated lobbying laws. Giuliani has not been accused of wrongdoing yet, and he has said he acted properly on behalf of the president. He didn't. For months, the Southern District prosecutors have been consulting officials in Washington about major investigative steps in the inquiry, according to two people briefed on those discussions. The arrival of the coronavirus in New York forced Southern District prosecutors to cancel interviews with witnesses in the investigation into Giuliani and his former associates. People briefed on the matter said the pandemic also forced a delay in the trial of Parnas and Fruman from this October until next February, putting off what could have been an embarrassing spectacle for the president until after the election. How interesting. Okay, so that's something. I guess we'll note that for the record. Other things that I had put aside for sharing with you. I'm going to jump around a little bit to try to get to a couple of different topics. One I just thought was interesting. A developing story here which I don't know whether we find a full write-up of it or not, but just one of those I told you so sort of things. I had kept referring some weeks ago, back before we had the tremendous success story pronounced by Kushner. The other project, the project he was spending his time on, and now you hear nothing about it, Project Airbridge, and how they were pirating all the PPE from around the country and around the world, and how I kept comparing it to the movie War Dogs and saying that Airbridge was basically War Dogs for PPE. There were a lot of people, new entrants into the PPE game, such as it is, who had no experience with procuring or certainly not manufacturing any of this equipment, who suddenly found themselves with the ability to land multi-million-dollar contracts to provide it to key hospital centers around the country, even though they didn't know what it was or how to get it. Now, though, we have a much clearer parallel to War Dogs, which is, if you haven't seen it, you're missing out. It's actually a fun and entertaining film, but is the story of, I guess, based on a true story, right? I don't know. But at any rate, it doesn't really matter, actually, whether it was true or not, in order for it to have been an entertaining and worrisome story, and especially not now that we're actually seeing, if it wasn't a true story, then we're now seeing real life imitate art. But the story there was they got into contracting during the prolonged Afghanistan and Iraq wars, and through an escalating series of events, found themselves trying to fulfill a contract, a call from American Armed Forces for ammunition to supply either was it Iraqi or Afghan police, and they needed, some ungodly number of rounds of ammunition, and the U.S. government was having trouble procuring it legally, and these guys basically said, well, we'll do you the dirty work of procuring it illegally, but telling you it's legally procured so that you can cover up. They basically bought Soviet bloc and Chinese ammunition, which apparently would have been prohibited under the rules of the contract, and sold it to the U.S. government, which isn't permitted to buy Chinese and otherwise illicit, for whatever reason, ammunition. But the deal was that it was all packed up in boxes that indicated that it was of Chinese origin. And what they did in order to make things work so that they wouldn't be immediately called out for selling illegal Chinese ammunition to the federal government, they repackaged it so that it didn't say made in China. And an interesting aspect of the movie is the extent to which this is illegal and known to them to be illegal, but some of the shadier operators in the whole episode convinced these contractors, look, the U.S. government knows very well that it can't find 1 billion rounds of ammunition that it needs on the legitimate market. The reason they're contracting this out, the very reason this is an outside contract, is to give them plausible deniability when they take possession of those bullets nonetheless, knowing that you can't find the quantities you want without tapping the Chinese market for it. What they're looking for is someone else to be the middleman and possibly take the heat for hiding the fact that this ammunition has got Chinese origins. Pardon me. So they agree to take on that role, and it doesn't work out very well for them. In the current day real life example, I turn now to the tweets from J. David McSwain, a reporter with ProPublica, who has this story described in his tweets, and I imagine soon thereafter a long form write-up of it, probably down at the end of this tweet thread. But here we go. Here's the start of it. A TaskRabbit contractor in San Antonio. You all know about TaskRabbit. I don't know that much about it except having seen it mentioned in stories we've read in the past. An online, gig economy marketplace where you sign up to do, freelance on a freelance basis, take care of whatever tasks employers have available for you for some flat rate. I need people to stuff envelopes. So I would go on TaskRabbit and say, I'll pay you whatever minimum wage per hour to do this job. And very often working remotely or contracting remotely anyway. But here's a TaskRabbit contractor in San Antonio told me he stumbled onto a warehouse where people were repackaging, and that's the key word here, repackaging, right? Repackaging non-medical Chinese masks. Again, repackaging Chinese, just like war dogs. Masks, non-medical masks, so that they could pass for medical use and be sold to Texas. It's really amazing. So began my latest journey into the world of COVID profiteers. The next tweet here, his name, that would be the TaskRabbit contractor, was Lucas Rensko, Rensko, and he showed up in a warehouse where there were other taskers earning about $20 an hour, better than minimum wage, ripping Chinese masks out of plastic bags where they probably were presumably packaged to try and maybe keep them sterile, although there's some question about whether they were ever sterile, I guess. But ripping them out of their plastic bags and stuffing them into new ones that were identical, but for one potentially deadly difference. The old packages were labeled in all caps, medical use prohibited. The new bags didn't have that warning. And then we have the before and after. And there's, some other things written on here. There's KN95 mask from Wentianchang, I guess the Chinese source here. And then it does indeed at the bottom say medical use prohibited. And then it says 10 pieces. It says 10 masks per package. The new package also says Wentianchang KN95 mask, 10 pieces. But it's missing that medical use prohibited stamp. And it also says down in the corner here, there's a little circle that says BFE greater than or equal to 95%. In other words, the KN95 masks that we were told would filter out 95% of particles of a size, size being enough to filter out the coronavirus. These are the N95 masks that we were told would, in a medical setting, prevent medical workers from breathing in and inhaling the virus. These masks wouldn't do that, but the warning that says that they wouldn't, that was dutifully placed on them by the Chinese manufacturers, well, they got rid of that. Although I note that they did have almost identical packaging provided to them, presumably by the Chinese suppliers, but we don't know. Maybe they counterfeited those plastic bags as well. Medical workers' best defense against a virus, McSwain continues, that ravages the body with horrifying complexity is a simple but trustworthy mask. But many thousands of these repackaged ones were potentially making their way into the Texas supply. Here's the warehouse, and where else? What would be worse than adding it to Texas? Now, of course, Governor Abbott can say, it's not my fault. We got counterfeit masks. How did we know? Before flying down to Texas to look into it, I did a little research from my D.C. apartment, says McSwain. Jamie Rivera, who hired the TaskRabbits, had posted some intriguing photos on Facebook of boxes of masks bursting at the seams and stacked high in his garage. These are labeled AYM-KN95. Early on, the FDA approved these for use in healthcare settings, but they were taken off the list in May. They're nowhere near the 95% effective that's required. In fact, they've tested as low as 39% effective in CDC tests. Counterfeit masks, also pretty much like I predicted, although, it wasn't a very smart or capable prediction. I think anybody could have probably predicted that. More curious was the screenshot Rivera posted of a $2,000 payment from BM. The initials BM and like, I don't know what, one of those payment services where they don't have, if you don't put a picture up of yourself, they just put your initials there. One of his Facebook friends noted, looks like code for a drug deal. This screenshot for some reason. 417 says KN95, 3.7 or 37.5 drop off and 50K handoff to, and then a name is blanked out here, 79.2K and J, something blanked out here, 7,500. Just, cryptic sort of thing. And somebody saying, yeah, looks like a drug deal. So McSwain says, I pulled out my phone and looked for him on Venmo and was delighted to see all his transactions were public. I guess this is Rivera, who he's looking up here. But then someone named Brennan Mulligan, Brennan B, Mulligan M, was paying him and others on Venmo to repackage masks. Check it out. There's a screenshot here, right? 5/6 packaging before 7:15 a.m. Here's another payment. 10.5 hours on 5th, repackaging. All noting that it's about repackaging. Turns out Mulligan is a successful San Francisco tech/apparel businessman. He runs SKYOU, SKU. Like, well, we can talk about that. SKU. I'm guessing SKU because they use SKU is like the product tagging. The SKU number for things is a sort of a universal code, right? Like barcoding. He runs SKU or SKU, whose 3D design software lets people customize apparel that ships directly from China. Pretty much everybody who's been importing things from China has thought about repurposing themselves as a PPE importer. So it makes sense, I thought, says McSwain. As I found in this story, a lot of apparel and textile businesses use China connections to make their way into the mask market. And here at last is the story. The secret, absurd world of coronavirus mask traders and middlemen. There's more. Middlemen trying to get rich off government money. Well, like I said, very much like war dogs, but for PPE. And so we won't have time to read that, but I'll recommend it to you as weekend reading, the article. But at least his tweet thread continues here, but it looks like it pretty much is trying to tell the story of the piece in short form. And his thread ends with P.S. It remains a mess out here in the Wild West of PPE trading. Companies, well, it says pooping up overnight, but I think he meant popping up overnight, but they really are pooping up the situation, aren't they? Untested. Some whose owners have questionable backgrounds. Federal agencies say they're vetting these companies, but we've found a ton of problems. In another article that he points at, a closer look at federal COVID contractors reveals inexperience, fraud accusations, and a weapons dealer operating out of someone's house. Again, a lot like war dogs, where there were weapons dealers. And it should surprise no one at this point, but I recommend the entirety of the thread to you, as well as these two articles. It would be worth spending your time on over the weekend. Another aging article that I meant to spend some time on. A lot of heating up over the state flag in Mississippi, one of the, well, originally several and now just down to a few states that actually retain the Confederate battle flag that people know when they think of as the Confederate flag. It's not the real Confederate flag. We can discuss that ad nauseum, but one that incorporates that cross stars and bars battle flag pattern into its state flag. Mississippi has retained that. A lot of other states have just retained hints of it, but some have managed to purge it altogether. But a lot of states were a lot more subtle about that and just used that cross pattern. without the stars. But Mississippi has it up in its field where we put in the U.S. flag, where you'd find the stars, they have the Confederate battle flag. Well, a lot of pushback on that as people begin banning the Confederate flag as a symbol from a lot of different platforms and venues. So lots of pressure for Mississippi to change its ways. A lot of retailers, the big retailers, Walmart, Amazon, etc., saying that they will no longer sell you a Mississippi state flag so long as that's on there. That's kind of interesting. But will that exert the kind of pressure that Mississippi needs in order to make the change? I think I saw, was it Faith Hill, the country music star, tweeting today that she too was upset about this, and I think it was her, and she was saying, I think as a Mississippian herself, if I have it right, she was embarrassed by the retention of the Confederate flag on the state flag and that it was time for change. Could that do it? Maybe, maybe not by itself. Could something else do it? And I've been holding on to this one for a while, so I'm pleased to be able to share it now. Since June 18th, I've been holding on to this one. This might do it. Reported by Mississippi Today. Well, this was June 18th anyway. So Mississippi Then, but the name of the publication, Mississippi Today, MississippiToday.org, as a matter of fact. Adam, oh boy, goodness, look at this name. Ganicho. Maybe is that like a Cajun name? Don't know. Ganucheau, I'm guessing. Anyway, here's the story. Ready? Finally. SEC Commissioner, the sports. SEC Commissioner to lawmakers. Lose Confederate emblem from state flag or lose championship events. Now you're talking, because SEC and football and sports and whatnot. Finally, something that makes a difference to Mississippians. Greg Sankey, Commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, said in a statement on Thursday, but this was back in mid-June, a couple days ago, like last week, right? Said on last Thursday, I guess, that the conference, the SEC, would consider banning championship events in Mississippi until the state changes its flag, which contains the Confederate battle emblem. As protests regarding racial equities, it's an interesting way of putting it, and Confederate iconography rage across the state and nation, lawmakers have discussed changing the state flag in the past 2 weeks, one of the most earnest discussions of changing the flag since 2001, when Mississippi voters decided nearly 2-1 to keep the current flag. Both Ole Miss and Mississippi State University are members of the SEC. It's past time for change to be made to the flag of the state of Mississippi, Sankey said in a statement. Our students deserve an opportunity to learn and compete. Well, some of them do, but, student athletes, that whole thing, questionable. But okay, our students deserve an opportunity to learn and compete in environments that are inclusive and welcoming to all. Mississippi State President Mark Keenum released a statement shortly after Sankey's statement published. Since 2015, our student association, Robert Holland Faculty Senate, and University Administration have been firmly on record in support of changing the state flag, Keenum said in the statement. I have reiterated that view to our state's leaders on multiple occasions, including during face-to-face discussions in recent days and hours. On June 12th, I wrote to the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker of the Mississippi House, reaffirming that support. The letter said, in part, that our flag should be unifying, not a symbol that divides us. I emphasized that it is time for a renewed, respectful debate on the issue. Ole Miss Chancellor Glenn Boyce and Athletics Director Keith Carter, also Athletics Director, now that's serious, right? Released a joint statement in response to Sankey's comments. The University of Mississippi community concluded years ago that the Confederate battle flag did not represent many of our core values, such as civility and respect for others, Boyce and Carter wrote. It's a gentle way of putting it, but we'll take it. In 2015, the university stopped flying the state flag over our campus. Did nobody notice that one? I didn't. Mississippi needs a flag that represents the qualities about our state that unite us, not those that still divide us. We support the SEC's decision or position for changing the Mississippi state flag to an image that is more welcoming and inclusive for all people. One bill that would change the state flag is pending before the Senate Constitution Committee, although Senator Chris Johnson, a Republican of Hattiesburg and chair of that committee, has said he will not take up the bill. Lawmakers could choose to file any new resolution or bill, but a two-thirds vote of both houses of both the state and Senate would be required to consider any bill to change the flag. The legislature is expected to remain in session until next Friday, and I guess that's today. So I don't know. I mean, I guess they could reconvene, and I'm not sure why it would require a two-thirds vote to change the flag, but who knows what sort of weird rules they may have set up for themselves on purpose to try to avoid it. But that's pretty serious. That's the next step, I guess. I guess at some point it becomes incumbent on the athletic departments and the athletes themselves, perhaps, as is happening at Liberty University, where black athletes are apparently are leaving the university over the various racist statements of Jerry Falwell Jr., who runs the place. I happened to see something this morning that flew by that apparently, I don't know, it looked like maybe some sort of crazy student leader at maybe Kansas State was making some sort of ridiculous, racially intolerant statements, actually about George Floyd. I think that, if I saw it, now I remember the tweet was incredibly like a congratulations to George Floyd, 1 month drug free. Like, I can't believe that anybody would put that down in writing, but he did. And I don't know, I guess he's some sort of student leader on campus at Kansas State, and the football players have begun tweeting, hey, I'm not going to play at a place that tolerates this sort of thing. This is a student under your control. You should be either telling them, get rid of them, or get some new football players. We can't play in this atmosphere. And that's the sort of pressure that might actually make things change. And I don't know whether it's at that level or whether the prospect of losing the ability to host SEC championship games in Mississippi would be enough to get the state legislature to change its mind. But I guess you'd probably see it if you started to see the football programs of Mississippi actually stop playing, not because of coronavirus, but because players simply refuse to play to represent the state that still has this kind of flag. That would do it, but it's an awfully large burden to ask college football players to carry, though many of them have exhibited exactly that kind of strength. Can't necessarily expect it of all of them, but maybe they could get some help from their coaches on that one. Don't you think? All right. Well, about time to wrap it up for the weekend. No time for any additional stories, I don't think, unless there's anything that I could scroll by and say, oh, yeah, go read this thing, and I'll give you a link. There's lots of interesting stuff. A lot of places I was hoping to head to on a Friday like today, but, that's just the way it is. There's only so much time. I think we got a pretty good sampling to send you off for the weekend. Stay home during the weekend. If you need to use any of the stories that we passed on to you to convince someone to do something different with their life, do it by phone or FaceTime or Zoom conference if you have to. No just dropping by at parties, even for just a few hours, to have a socially distanced encounter there. It doesn't work that way. And Texas is the last place that we should be looking to for those kind of experiments. Anyway, all right, let's see. One quick note I guess I'll throw in here before we start up the music and to tell you what comes up next. Our good friend BJ Hutch from Montreal sending us this note. A bit of distraction from the Supreme Court. From the Supreme Court of Canada. Ready? Let's see if we can get this one here. Bit of distraction. Supreme Court of Canada dismisses Uber's appeal, allowing a $400 million class action lawsuit to move ahead. I guess the drivers getting together and pushing back on the multi-billion-dollar behemoth that is slowly ruining their lives and everyone else's. So that's an article from the CBC is connected there. We'll include that in the roundup so you can read over that over the weekend and impress your friends and neighbors at the parties you're not attending, but calling into with your knowledge of what's going on in Canada, and in particular before their Supreme Court. Now, for a quick summary of everything else that we missed going on around the country and around the world, we have the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next with Justice Putnam. Here's what he's got on tap for you. Barr's micromanaging of the DOJ. More look at that. It might be out of proportion, but his micromanaging of all Trump-tied cases is totally off the hook. I'm interested to find out even more about that. That's the most intriguing story of the day. Trump wants federal hiring to focus on skills rather than degrees, since he only went to an education-themed school himself. The Trump administration wants to end congressional review of arms sales because of the horrible way Congress acted when the Sauds dismembered Jamal Khashoggi. And a world-leading virus expert ousted from his job battling COVID-19 has alleged that the Trump administration did what?
From Daily Kos Radio.
I'll tell you next.
On netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
They allege, of course, that the administration intensified its campaign to punish him for revealing shortcomings in the U.S. response. Internationally, Russia quit a UN arrangement to protect hospitals and humanitarian aid deliveries from being hit by warring parties after the UN busted Russia and Syria for bombing hospitals.